Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
Mark Brennan. Mark, it's always a pleasure. Great to have you back.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Not many stories, I think, shock you these days, but I was really taken aback when I saw Jay Wright was retiring. What did you think when you heard it?
Yeah, as a longtime Philadelphia 76ers fan, every time that job opened, I was kind of hoping that Jay Wright would take it, but I guess he's saying he's out of coaching for good. So, listen, it seems to me, I don't know Jay. I know of the program, obviously. I'm a guy who's been a big Philadelphia fan and have always followed Villanova. But it seems to me like he's accomplished what he thought he wants to accomplish, and you can't argue with that. He's a Hall of Famer. I was stunned to hear that he's only 60 years old. I mean, that's kind of, putting things into some perspective. But, credit to him for walking away when he's happy to walk away.
It's interesting that Roy Williams walked away. Now, I know Mike Krzyzewski's 75, and now Jay Wright's walking away. Should we read into anything with the way the current climate is in college sports with this happening with veteran coaches, or is that too much of a leap?
I think it might be a little bit too much of a leap. I mean, I know where you're coming from with the transfer portal and all the NIL stuff. It's really become just a completely different thing. But I think with all of those coaches, Steve, they were so well established and had accomplished so much that to me, I could understand them just walking away because they felt it was the time to walk away. Obviously, with Coach K, I think it's very difficult. With all due respect to anybody who's coached into their later years, I just think anymore it's very difficult to do that. And just with everything those guys accomplished, I think they just have so much they could hang their hats on. But yeah, I mean, I would say maybe a little bit. But to me, I think where you might see a difference, and I don't know how we would ever quantify this, is less people willing to get in it and stay in it for a long, long time. Less people getting out after 10 years or people getting out after 12 years, that sort of thing, because it just grinds them down.
All right. And quickly on the Penn State basketball front, two transfers are definitely in. Andrew Funk from Bucknell, Cameron Winter from Drexel. Yeah. What were your thoughts on the two of them coming in? Because obviously with another one available, they'd like to get a big man in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Cameron is a guy who terrific point guard. Very well-rounded. I mean, the one thing he did not do well last year, I think this, is shoot the three.
Yeah.
But that's where I think bringing in a guy like Funk, they kind of complement one another. I don't know how much they'll actually be on the court together with all the other pieces that Penn State has. But, I mean, I think you're bringing in two guys who are going to complement the players who are there. But I do think it's imperative for them to get another big guy. Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at who they lost. The amount of minutes, the amount of production that John Harrod gave you, to rely on two true freshmen to come in and kind of handle that load, I think would be very difficult to do. So two nice additions. I also like the fact that they were able to, look around the state, see two guys who were very good at the mid-major level in state, and give these guys an opportunity. Obviously, these kids aren't from Pennsylvania per se, but to give both of these guys an opportunity, it's just kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier. It's a whole new ball game for these coaching staffs. No longer do you just have to scout high school players. You really have to be scouting throughout the year other college players, just wondering who's going to come open. And when they do, make a move early and get them in here. But clearly in these first few years, it's probably going to be this way forever. But I think in the first couple years of the Micah Shrewsbury tenure, the transfer portal has been big, and I think will continue to be big.
All right, so let's transition now to football. As you sit down and go through the checklist of what you're looking for on Saturday, what would be some of the things and items that would be on that checklist?
I think number one is the offensive line. I mean, I know that they've been banged up, and not everybody who will be playing will be playing next season. Will be there playing this Saturday. Including a guy like Hunter Norzad, the transfer who's coming in. But the line to me last year, I went into last season thinking that had the opportunity to be a strength, and frankly, it wasn't. And I think we're in year 2 or 3 under Phil Troutwine. I think we want to start seeing these guys showing some cohesion and kind of coming together. So that's one area. I think obviously, everybody's talking about the backup quarterbacks. I'll be surprised if we see a whole heck of a lot of Sean Clifford just because we don't have to. So, what do we see? What do we see from Aveyu? What do we see from Alar and from Bo Pribula, if I can spit it out? I think
that's okay.
That's
that's my job.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You actually do it on the fly, which I don't know how the heck you do it. And listen, everybody's hearing really, really good things. And I know I can't put you in a spot, but all we're hearing is great things about Nick Singleton. So I'm anxious to get a look at him and see what they actually allow him to do, or whether they want to try to keep that under wraps. And over on defense, just how everybody's kind of adjusting to Manny Diaz. Right. I mean, it seems to me when we talk to the players and to the other coaches, the one thing that has, I don't want to say jumped out, but the one thing that I think has been a common thread has been his abilities as a communicator.
Yeah.
And, to step into a situation like this where Brent Pry did a tremendous job, was beloved by his players, that's not always an easy thing to do. But to be able to step in, be your own personality, not try to be Brent Pry, and install your stuff, to me, from all indications, the communication has been there. And then I think everybody, listen, if people haven't heard about this kid, keep an eye on Zane Durant. He appears to be an undersized defensive tackle, but he is 285 pounds or whatever it is of pure muscle, early enrollee D tackle. He's going to be a guy who plays a lot of football. Now, I'm not saying he's going to start, but everybody is talking this kid up. And Steve, you've been in this long enough to know that one of the most difficult spots to make an immediate impact at the college level, one is obviously offensive line, and one is defensive line. For an early enrollee who should still be in high school now to come in and be the talk of spring camp, I think that's impressive. And, I'm hoping they let him loose a little bit. I'm anxious to see what he does. And that'll be fun to see how that defensive line in general, a decent Isaac coming back, Hakeem Beeman, that kind of goes in line with what I said about the offensive group. I think you have a lot of talent there. Let's see how these two groups kind of go at one another.
A lot of people obviously are incredibly curious, and justifiably so, about Drew Aller and Bo Pribula. Christian Veilleux went through spring practice last year, and it was the first time he'd done any football work of any kind because his fall season in 2020 was canceled. What are you looking for out of him now that he has a year under his belt?
Well, yeah, and I think the other thing, Steve, was the opportunity that he got in the Rutgers game.
Yep.
I mean, that is just absolutely invaluable. So not only did he go in, but he went in and he was a productive player, and they didn't really dumb everything down for him. I mean, I don't think it was the entire thing that Clifford would have run. But, yeah, I mean, so now all of a sudden, I think you look back to where they were last year, and this is with all due respect to where Veilleux was at that point, but you as you said, he didn't play his senior year. And Taquan Roberson, I mean, they had one proven quarterback at the D1 level in the program. Now, I think you can say you have two, and I think you have two guys who project as that. So all of a sudden, you have four legit D1 QBs, and that's a much different position than where they were. And I think we all know, we can look back, and again, Taquan Roberson, tremendous kid. I think he was just in over his head, and we saw that out at the Iowa game.
Mm-hmm.
How might that whole season be a little bit different if they had a more prepared backup at that point? And I think it would have been a lot different.
What is your post-game approach as to how you write about blue-white games, considering it is a spring scrimmage and they won't be back in camp until the beginning of August? What is the approach you like to take from a writer's point of view?
I don't want to give away my secrets. No, I've said this before, but what I'll do, Steve, seriously, what I'll try to do is we're going to have media room access with players for the first time since pre-pandemic. Okay, so that's number one.
Yep.
So that is in and of itself is going to be interesting, and I really welcome that back. But I'm going to look around and I'm going to see where the biggest crowd of people is, and I'm going to go in the opposite direction.
Right.
And I'm going to look for guys who maybe we haven't had as much chance to talk to. You know, maybe a Malik Mega, you know, maybe some of these younger guys. Now, they don't allow the true freshmen to talk, the early enrollees. I'm not sure if they'll allow any of the true freshmen from last year to talk, which is fine. I never have any issue with that. I know people have always complained, even back under Joe, and it's like, you know what? We will have plenty of time to talk to these guys throughout their careers. Right. There's no reason to rush it. I know when I was in college, obviously, I didn't play sports at anything close to this level, but I would have been terrified as a freshman to have to face goofballs like me. But I think that's one of the real keys. And I try to do the same thing at Media Day, where you see where the crowd is. Everybody's going to have that, right? So I think it's more important to go and talk to some of the people you've never really had a chance to talk to. I always remember, I forget which year it was. You know, you're better with these years than I was, but we're at football media day, and nobody was around Darryl Clark. Like, nobody.
Right.
I think he had just come into the program. You know, there was some academic issues or something.
Right.
And
he'd gone to Kiski, I think.
Yeah. So he had committed 1 year, and then he had to go to Kiski. And the thing about Darryl Clark, this isn't a knock on him, because anybody who's ever talked to him, he's a super intelligent guy.
No doubt.
So I'm not sure what happened during his high school career. But the point being, I think that was back when it was Morelli and who else was going at. I mean, there were people competing for the job. Morelli was the well-known quarterback, and there's Darryl Clark sitting by himself. And you know this, Steve, because you've talked to Darryl Clark a lot. But I went over and I talked to Darryl Clark one-on-one, and wow, I'm just like, this kid is something else. And, of course, as he goes through his career, everybody gets how intelligent he is. Everybody gets his personality, but I was fortunate enough to see that relatively early. I was able to do that with C.J. Thorpe as well, even though C.J. is a guy who moved on from Penn State. But you get to know some of these younger players. And, you know, I know that you talked to Tyler Donahue earlier. A lot of our recruiting people get to know them even earlier than that. Mm-hmm. But to get to know some of these young guys, I think, is always kind of a fun thing to do, to talk to them for the first time.
One final question that deals with rules. The NCAA came out with rule changes, and for the most part, they're pretty, they're subtle and they're fine. But one was, if you get a targeting call in the second half of a game, you can then appeal it, and the NCAA will review it. And if they see it your way, the player can play in the first half of the next game. If they don't, you see still out of the first half of the next game. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I think anything where that you can use video to get something right. Listen, I think we all know that being an official is a very difficult job, and to try to make those bang-bang decisions on those little micro TVs and stuff, even if you have help from up in the booth, to me, if you have time to take a step back and get it right, I think that's a good thing. I have no issue with that whatsoever, so long as they do it the right way. And, again, I think that putting in that rule, the spirit of it is in the right place. So, yeah, I like that. I like the fact that they didn't make these poor players take that walk of shame after they, were penalized and make them leave. And, that to me, I don't know who was even thinking about that. I didn't see all the rule changes, but I was really hoping that they would adjust that overtime rule, Steve, because
they didn't.
After suffering through that one, I know that has to be the dumbest way of overtime the dumbest approach to overtime that I've ever thought of. So I was really hoping they would change that, and I'm sorry they didn't.
I felt like I was doing World Cup penalty kicks. All right.
Well, I was down shooting video on the field. So imagine me. I'm old and decrepit and tired, and I'm running from one end of the field to the other. Man. It was hilarious.
Oh my goodness, Mark! Always a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to seeing you on Saturday.
Yeah, it should be a fun time. It should be. I think it's going to be good weather eventually, and I'm glad that the blue-white game is back. Listen, Steve, first time since 2019. This is such a big part of not only Penn State, but James Franklin said it yesterday, of this entire state college community. You and I are now state college guys, and to have this back, to do what it does in a positive way for all these local businesses, I just think it's such a great thing. So I'm happy that it's back and look forward to seeing you and everybody else Saturday.
That's great. Well said, Mark. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks to you, Steve.